Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Oklahoma. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you are watching from and the exact time when you are listening to this narration. We are interested in knowing what places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. In the sweltering summer of 1957, the small town of Bristow, Oklahoma, became the reluctant epicenter of a discovery that would haunt the state for decades. July 17th, according to county records, marked Day 3 of excavation for State Highway 66 expansion, when operator Frank Denton's bulldozer blade struck something solid where geological surveys indicated only soft earth should be. Denton's initial assumption of hitting a forgotten septic tank dissolved into horror as the collapsed structure revealed its contents. Human remains, arranged with such deliberate precision that responding officers initially believed they had discovered an unknown Native American burial site. This theory collapsed when Dr. Eleanor Mitchell arrived from Oklahoma State University and identified the bones as belonging to multiple individuals, primarily children, none interred in any recognized cultural tradition. The Bristow Herald's front page on July 19th described a collection of skeletal remains arranged in what appears to be geometric patterns. What the newspaper failed to mention was the small artifacts positioned with the bones, silver hair clips, brass buttons, fragments of leather shoes, all meticulously preserved and positioned according to some incomprehensible design. Dr. Mitchell's preliminary report, filed with Creek County authorities and sealed until 1972, documented evidence of deliberate posthumous manipulation of remains and ritualistic arrangement suggesting prolonged access to the deceased. Most disturbing were the tool marks indicating methodical disarticulation and the careful sorting of bones by type rather than individual, creating what Mitchell termed a grotesque mosaic of human elements. As summer heat intensified, the excavation site required 24-hour security after 3 separate attempts by unknown individuals to access the scene at night. The investigation that began with a bulldozer's chance discovery would eventually unearth secrets buried not just in Oklahoma soil, but in deliberately obscured county records, faded newspaper archives, and the selective memories of Bristow's oldest residents. The macabre collection beneath the collapsed cellar was merely the physical manifestation of a darkness that had taken root in Bristow nearly half a century earlier. Bristow, Oklahoma Territory, in 1911, existed in a state of perpetual dust and ambition. The newly formed state, barely 4 years removed from its territorial status, was experiencing rapid transformation as oil discoveries throughout the region promised instant wealth to fortunate landowners. County records show the town's population doubled between 1908 and 1911, reaching just over 1,700 souls, most harboring dreams that their modest plots might sit atop liquid fortune. Into this atmosphere of transience and speculation arrived the Todd family in March 1911, purchasing a 40-acre property, approximately 3 miles northeast of town. The Creek County Land Office recorded the transaction with particular note of the cash payment, unusual in a time when most properties changed hands through credit arrangements. Everett Todd, described in contemporary accounts as a man of rigid posture and few words, established himself as a livestock trader with connections to Kansas City markets. His wife, Martha, recalled by neighbor Gertrude Wilson in a 1958 interview as painfully thin, with eyes that never settled, rarely ventured into town, citing persistent headaches aggravated by Oklahoma's harsh sunlight. But it was the Todd twins, Elijah and Ezekiel, who lingered most vividly in community memory. Identical in appearance down to a small mole below their right ears, the 16-year-old boys presented sharply contrasting personalities that longtime Bristow resident Thomas Hargrove later described as like looking at the same person through 2 different windows. Elijah cultivated an easy charm that quickly established him among the town's social circles, particularly impressing teachers with his articulate speech and careful manners. Ezekiel, by contrast, moved through spaces with watchful silence that many found unsettling, his gaze described by several former classmates as calculating, The Todd's homestead quickly took shape that spring, with Everett supervising construction of extensive outbuildings and what local carpenter Isaiah Jenkins noted in his account books as reinforced storm cellar with unusual specifications. The property's isolation and the high fence Everett insisted on installing raised few eyebrows in a community where privacy was respected and eccentricity common among newcomers. The family attended Methodist services sporadically, donated appropriately to civic causes, and otherwise maintained the careful distance that would later prove so consequential to their activities. The first child disappeared on October 17, 1911. 9-year-old Samuel Winters failed to return home after being sent to deliver eggs to a neighbor half a mile from his family's farm outside Bristow. The Bristow Herald reported 3 days of intensive searching before autumn rains washed away any potential tracks. According to sheriff's records preserved in the Creek County Courthouse, Samuel's mother insisted he was a dutiful boy who would never wander, while his father suggested he might have been drawn to follow the railroad tracks that had recently been extended northward. By November, the search was abandoned. The Winters family moved to Tulsa the following spring, their departure hastened by rumors that Samuel had been neglected and likely run away. The second disappearance occurred in February 1912. Abigail Collins, age 11, vanished while walking home from school in Slick, a small settlement 17 miles southeast of Bristow. The Bristow Herald described unprecedented community response as over 60 men searched for 5 days through freezing rain. Sheriff Willard Holcomb's official report, dated February 26, 1912, concluded that the girl likely fell into one of the region's numerous ravines, swollen with winter runoff. By summer of 1912, 3 more children had vanished. Brothers Michael and James Thornton, ages 8 and 10, from Depew, and Emma Blackwood, age 12, from Kellyville. The proximity of all disappearances to railroad lines led authorities to blame transients and vagabonds, a theory the Herald reported as fact, despite lack of evidence. Surviving letters from the Thornton family to Sheriff Holcomb reveal increasing desperation and frustration with official indifference. The final disappearance came in December 1913 when Rebecca Cunningham, age 12, vanished while gathering pine branches near her family's property just outside Bristow town limits. The Creek County Gazette reported that terror grips local communities as 6th child vanishes without trace, documenting how parents had begun accompanying children even on short walks and removing them from schools. The case prompted Governor Lee Cruz to dispatch a state investigator, though his report concluded only that insufficient evidence exists to establish pattern or perpetrator. As mysteriously as they had begun, the disappearances ceased after Rebecca Cunningham. Within 18 months, with wartime concerns mounting, the missing children faded from newspaper coverage, preserved only in local memory and painfully maintained family photograph albums. Dr. Mitchell's systematic investigation led first to the Creek County Courthouse, where land records confirmed that the property where construction workers had made their grisly discovery had belonged to the Todd family from March 19, 1911 until November 8, 1919. The documentation trail revealed that excavation for the highway had inadvertently uncovered the reinforced cellar specifically mentioned in building permits filed by Everett Todd in April 1911. With the property connection established, Mitchell began interviewing elderly Bristow residents, recording 12 extensive testimonials that painted an increasingly disturbing portrait of the Todd twins. Gerald Simmons, age 81 inches, 1,957, had attended Bristow High School with the brothers and recalled how they moved as if connected by invisible string, turning their heads at exactly the same moment, finishing each other's sentences. Bristow High School records, preserved by diligent administrator Margaret Wilkins for nearly 5 decades, showed both boys consistently achieved top marks, particularly in sciences. Their academic transcripts revealed unusual elective selections, advanced chemistry, comparative anatomy, and independent study projects focusing on biological symmetry. Most revealing was former teacher Harriet Danforth, aged 89 and living in a Tulsa nursing home, who had preserved a troubling essay written by one of the twins titled On the Perfect Symmetry of Paired Things. The composition, which Danforth had never returned to its author due to its disturbing content, contained elaborate anatomical illustrations, comparing human bilateral symmetry to various natural phenomena, with particular focus on the sacred perfection of identical twins. The essay proposed that true divinity exists only in perfect mirroring, and suggested that imperfect specimens might be improved through careful intervention. Danforth recalled that the paper had been signed simply Todd, making it impossible to determine which twin had authored it. School attendance records showed contrasting social patterns between the otherwise identical boys. Elijah participated in debate club, literary society, and served as laboratory assistant to the chemistry teacher. Multiple classmates remembered his engaging personality and ability to charm even the most stern faculty members. Ezekiel, conversely, appears only in academic records, with no extracurricular participation. Former classmate Dorothy Jenkins remembered him as impossibly still, watching everything while revealing nothing. Most unsettling was baseball team captain Walter Brooks's recollection that occasionally Elijah would stop mid-sentence, tilt his head as if listening to someone unseen, then continue speaking in a slightly different tone. Behavior Brooks and others attributed to some private game between the twins. The restoration team at the Oklahoma Historical Society received the water-damaged journal on August 3, 1957, according to preservation records signed by head archivist Thomas Jenkins. The leather-bound volume had survived decades underground only because it had been sealed inside a metal ammunition box, which had rusted through just enough to admit moisture, but not enough to completely deteriorate its contents. Initial examination revealed approximately 200 pages of dense handwriting executed in what appeared to be a deliberate cipher. Preliminary analysis by staff linguist Marion Holbrook determined the text contained elements of reversed writing, symbolic substitution, and what appeared to be mathematical notation, unlike any known encryption system. Recognizing the complexity of the task, the Historical Society contacted Dr. Lawrence Parrish, a cryptographer whose work during World War II had earned him quiet renown in academic circles. Parrish's methodical approach began with identifying recurring symbols and establishing frequency patterns, a process he later described as unusually challenging due to the writer's apparent determination to thwart standard cryptanalytic methods. The breakthrough came when Parrish realized the text needed to be read in a mirror, revealing a base layer of writing that used a substitution cipher where anatomical terms replaced common English words. Heart meant speak, eyes meant see, bones meant truth. Even after this discovery, full translation progressed slowly, with Parrish working nights and weekends beyond his university duties. The first successfully translated passages, dated April 1911, established the writer as one of the Todd twins, though he never identified himself by name, referring to himself only as the deserving one, and his brother as the reflection. The journal's early entries described the family's relocation to Oklahoma as necessary after Missouri became unsafe, and detailed the twins' role in designing the cellar beneath their new home. "Father believes he builds a storm shelter," one passage read, "while we prepare a temple for our sacred work." Multiple entries referenced perfect symmetry and divine balance, concepts the writer claimed to share with his twin while keeping hidden from their parents. "The reflection understands our purpose," wrote the author, "though he lacks my vision for its ultimate expression." Most disturbing were references to specimens the writer hoped to collect, with detailed criteria for selection including purity of form and balanced features. The final translated passage from April ended ominously. "Bristow offers abundant materials for our work. We need only wait for the proper moment to begin collection." Dr. Parrish's decryption work accelerated after his initial breakthrough, enabling him to translate entries from October 1911 that confirmed the investigation's darkest suspicions. The journal entry dated October 17th began with precise meteorological observations before shifting to a detailed account of the twins' first victim. "Today we acquired our first specimen," the writer recorded with clinical detachment. "Subject, male child approximately 9 years of age. Name Samuel Winters, according to his introduction. The journal described how the twins encountered the boy delivering eggs along the country road adjoining their property. Elijah initiated contact, while Ezekiel observed from concealment, a tactical approach the writer termed the hunter and the shadow. The writer detailed their method of gaining the child's trust through friendly conversation before mentioning their collection of authentic Indian arrowheads and pottery that they would be willing to show him. The specimen displayed expected curiosity and agreed to follow us after minimal persuasion. Noted the entry with disturbing precision. What followed was documented with methodical thoroughness that Dr. Parrish later described as the most clinically detached description of horror I have ever encountered. The journal detailed the brothers' careful planning, their parents' absence at a church function in town, the prepared space in the reinforced cellar, the division of tasks between them, with one twin designated to extract information while the other documented the process. Most disturbing was the ritualistic framework the writer imposed on these acts, describing them as necessary steps toward perfect symmetry and contributions to the greater balance. The entry included precise measurements of the victim's physical features, noting with apparent satisfaction certain proportions that aligned with the writer's concept of divine ratio. The final paragraphs detailed the preservation process, with specific bones selected for what the writer called the composition, while other remains were respectfully returned to the earth in the sacred manner. The journal entry concluded with a passage that chilled investigators. The reflection performed his role adequately, though his hands trembled at crucial moments. I remained steady throughout, confirming my position as the deserving one. We have begun our great work, though many more specimens will be required before the pattern achieves perfection. The reflection agrees we must wait at least 3 months before acquiring the next contribution to ensure safety. The journal entries from November and December 1911 revealed the disturbing philosophical framework driving the twins' actions. Translated passages outlined what the writer called the doctrine of perfect pairs, a belief system apparently developed over years of obsessive contemplation. From earliest memory, one passage stated, "We understood what others could not, that God's truest expression exists in perfect symmetry." The writer recounted childhood experiences that reinforced this fixation. Hours spent creating mirror, image drawings, arranging objects in precise bilateral patterns, and studying their own identical reflections. The journal described an incident when the twins, age 7, discovered a dead sparrow and attempted to position it in perfect balance against its reflection in a hand mirror. An experiment, the writer claimed, produced a momentary shimmer of transcendence. This early experience apparently led to deliberate experimentation with small animals, beginning with mice and advancing to cats and dogs. Each balanced arrangement brought us closer to understanding, the writer explained with disturbing clarity. The reflection and I learned that organic materials, properly preserved and positioned, could channel energies unknown to ordinary minds. By age 12, according to the journal, the twins had developed elaborate theories about achieving transcendence through what they termed perfect composition. The writer explained their eventual transition to human subjects as inevitable progression toward higher harmony. The journal detailed their selection criteria with clinical precision. Specimens must possess naturally balanced features, proportional limbs, and harmonious measurements conforming to the divine ratio. Most disturbing were passages describing the twins' relationship. The reflection and I exist as the original perfect pair, the writer explained. Yet even between us exists competition to prove worthiness. Multiple entries described escalating challenges between them, with each brother attempting to demonstrate superior commitment to their disturbed cause. Today, I proved my dedication by extracting the symmetrical elements without anesthetic. One passage boasted, while the reflection required chemical assistance to complete his portion. Another entry noted, the reflection's composition showed improved technical execution but lacks the spiritual understanding evident in my arrangement. The December entries concluded with a chilling observation. As our collection grows, the reflection and I draw closer to the ultimate symmetry. When complete, Our work will transcend mere physical arrangement to achieve true balance between worlds. We will become the perfect bridge between realms, neither fully here nor there, but existing in divine equilibrium. Bristow, in the early 1910 seconds, existed in a state of perpetual transformation that created ideal conditions for concealment. Census records show the town's population nearly tripled between 1910 and 1915 as oil discoveries throughout Creek County attracted prospectors, workers, and opportunists from across the country. Harold Jenkins, who served as town clerk during this period, maintained meticulous visitor registries that recorded over 200 transient workers passing through monthly, creating what Dr. Mitchell termed perfect camouflage for predatory behavior. Contemporary newspaper accounts documented 18 new businesses opening in 1911 alone, while county records show property ownership changed hands at unprecedented rates. Against this backdrop of constant motion, the Todd family established a carefully calibrated public presence. First National Bank records show Everett Todd conducting regular livestock transactions with ranchers throughout the region, establishing himself as financially reliable if socially reserved. Methodist Church donation ledgers record consistent Todd family contributions, though Pastor William Hargrove's personal correspondence describes Everett as present, but never participating beyond minimal requirements. Martha Todd's gradual withdrawal from public life appears to have raised minimal concern in a community where women's hardships were commonplace. Dr. Samuel Richardson's medical logs note 3 house calls to the Todd residence between 1912 and 1913, each diagnosing Martha with nervous exhaustion and melancholia typical of prairie isolation. Most significant to the investigation was the community's perception of the Todd twins as essentially one social entity. Surviving classmates consistently described interactions with Elijah at school functions, church socials, and town celebrations, while few recalled meaningful engagement with Ezekiel. Yearbook records confirm Elijah's participation in school activities, while Ezekiel appears only in class photographs. This pattern created what Dr. Mitchell called a perfect diversionary technique, wherein the community registered the presence of the Todd boy without clearly distinguishing between the identical twins. Several elderly residents recalled assumptions that one twin must be helping at home when the other appeared in town, creating a perception that obscured their actual movements. Shopkeeper ledgers from Miller's General Store show regular purchases by E. Todd, without distinguishing which twin conducted transactions. Most telling was retired teacher Catherine Wilson's recollection that sometimes the Todd boy who called himself Elijah would respond with momentary confusion when addressed, as if temporarily forgetting which brother he was supposed to be. The architectural assessment of the collapsed cellar, completed by civil engineer Robert Thornton on September 8, 1957, revealed construction far beyond typical homestead requirements. County building permits, dated April 11, 1911, show Everett Todd requested authorization for a reinforced storm shelter with extended capacity, citing the region's notorious tornadoes as justification for unusual specifications. Construction supply invoices from Bristow Hardware and Millwood Lumber reveal purchases far exceeding normal shelter requirements. Industrial-grade cement, typically used for municipal projects, specialized waterproofing compounds, lead sheeting commonly used in medical facilities, and acoustic insulation materials. Thornton's analysis identified 3 distinct construction phases, suggesting the structure evolved beyond its original design. The foundational elements followed standard storm shelter patterns, with a concrete shell measuring 12 feet by 16 feet set into the natural slope behind the house. The second construction phase, completed approximately 2 months later according to delivery records, added interior walls creating 5 separate chambers of varying sizes. Most significant was the third phase, which incorporated sophisticated elements entirely unnecessary for weather protection. Walls lined with lead sheeting and acoustic insulation, a complex drainage system with channels carved into the concrete floor leading to a central collection pit, and an elaborate ventilation structure disguised as a standard well pump that would have allowed air exchange without external sound transmission. Most disturbing were the fixtures Thornton identified embedded in the stone walls of the two largest chambers. Iron rings positioned at regular intervals at both standing and seated heights, which chemical analysis confirmed had been in contact with human blood. The smallest chamber, measuring only 4 feet square, contained specialized shelving with 27 individual niches arranged in perfect symmetrical patterns. Each niche showed evidence of having held objects of specific dimensions, matching precisely the measurements of the bone arrangements discovered by construction workers. Thornton's report noted that achieving such construction in rural Oklahoma would have required considerable expertise, suggesting that the twins likely directed the specialized modifications while their father secured the basic structure. The most technically sophisticated element was the ventilation system, which incorporated baffles to muffle sound while allowing air exchange, demonstrating knowledge of acoustic engineering principles. Thornton's conclusion stated that the cellar represented a deliberately designed space for conducting activities requiring isolation, sound dampening, containment of subjects, and specialized preservation work, adding that the construction showed methodical planning inconsistent with impulsive criminal behavior. The question of parental knowledge emerged as a central ethical dimension of the investigation, prompting Dr. Mitchell to pursue both journal evidence and independent historical documentation. Translated journal entries from December 1911 through March 1912 painted a complex picture of family dynamics within the Todd household. The writer described Everett Todd as the perfect sentinel who guards without seeing, explaining how their father's rigid schedule and emotional detachment created optimal conditions for their activities. "Father provides without questioning," one entry noted. "His pride in our academic achievements blinds him to our higher purpose." Several passages detail deliberate manipulation tactics used to maintain this ignorance, including strategic conversations about college aspirations and occasional presentations of taxidermy specimens explained as scientific projects. Martha Todd's role emerged as more morally ambiguous. Journal entries from February 1912 described a troubling incident. "Mother descended to the sanctuary unexpectedly today while we were preparing the third contribution. Her screams subsided only when the reflection administered the calming solution." Subsequent entries tracked Martha's psychological deterioration with clinical detachment, noting her increasing periods of silence broken by fervent prayer. By March, the writer recorded Martha speaking of "my blessed boys, chosen by God for sacred work," suggesting a psychological defense mechanism, reframing their activities through religious delusion. This journal account aligned disturbingly with independent medical documentation. Records from Stillwater Psychiatric Hospital confirmed Martha Todd's admission on June 17, 1913, with admission notes describing acute religious mania with delusional framework centered on biblical purification rituals. Treatment notes documented Martha's fragmented statements about necessary sacrifices and "my sons, the angels of judgment." Most revealing was attending physician Dr. Harold McIntyre's observation that Martha demonstrated unusual calm when discussing her son's activities, suggesting complete dissociative compartmentalization of knowledge inconsistent with her moral framework. Martha was released after 3 months, with follow-up reports indicating continued delusion but no risk to others. The journal described her return as advantageous, with the writer noting, "Mother now actively protects our work through her madness, insisting to Father that our special projects must not be disturbed." This psychological transformation appeared to resolve the writer's concerns about discovery, with one October 1913 entry stating, "Father continues in willful blindness, while Mother's broken mind now sees our work as divine mandate, the perfect arrangement of protectors, leaving us free to complete the greater symmetry." The investigation concluded that Everett Todd likely maintained deliberate ignorance, while Martha experienced a psychotic break that transformed moral horror into religious delusion, effectively making both parents complicit through different psychological mechanisms. The journal entry dated December 19th, 1913 spans 17 pages of densely written text, representing the most comprehensive account of any abduction. Dr. Parrish's translation revealed an unsettling shift in tone from previous entries, with the clinical detachment giving way to what he termed almost religious ecstasy. The writer described spotting 12-year-old Rebecca Cunningham gathering pine branches near the property boundary, noting with disturbing specificity that her proportions match exactly the measurements required for the central element of our composition. Unlike previous methodical accounts, this entry contained elaborate justifications. She will not be diminished but elevated, transformed from ordinary flesh into the keystone of divine symmetry. The writer detailed an elaborate ruse involving a fabricated message from Rebecca's mother, requesting help carrying Christmas supplies from town. The account described Rebecca's initial trust, followed by growing suspicion as she was led not toward town, but toward the Todd property. The reflection's handling of her doubts was clumsy. The writer complained, requiring my intervention to prevent premature alarm. The passage describing Rebecca's confinement in the cellar marked a significant departure from previous entries, incorporating emotional language about her perfect terror and the beautiful symmetry of her screams. Most disturbing was the writer's detailed documentation of disagreement between the twins about how to proceed. The reflection insisted on old methods, revealing his fundamental lack of vision, the entry stated. He cannot comprehend that the final element requires a different approach, a more prolonged transformation. The writer expressed growing disillusionment with his twin, noting that his hands shook with base excitement rather than spiritual understanding, and questioning whether one who cannot transcend physical response deserves participation in the ultimate symmetry. The entry concluded with the writer's first explicit acknowledgement of culmination. With the sixth contribution secured, our work enters its final phase. The perfect pattern now lacks only its central element, the bridge between mirrored halves. The reflection believes we add to our collection, not understanding that completion requires subtraction as well as addition. Perfect symmetry cannot contain competing interpretations. One mirror must shatter for the true image to achieve clarity. County records confirm that Rebecca Cunningham's disappearance on December 19, 1913 marked the end of the pattern of missing children in the region. The Creek County Gazette documented unprecedented search efforts throughout the Christmas season, with over 200 volunteers combing the countryside without success. The timing suggested something significant changed within the Todd household after this final abduction, fundamentally altering the twins' activities and relationship. The journal entries from January through June 1914 deteriorate from the previous methodical documentation into increasingly disjointed writings that Dr. Parrish described as manifesting psychological fracturing. The once precise handwriting becomes erratic, with pressure variations suggesting emotional disturbance during composition. January entries contain repeated accusations against the reflection for betraying our sacred purpose through base physical gratification and contaminating the sanctuary with unworthy motives. By February, the writer describes extended periods of mutual surveillance, noting, "I watch him, watching me," each assessing the other's worthiness. The escalating conflict apparently spilled into public view, disrupting the careful separation the twins had previously maintained. Bristow High School attendance records from this period show both Elijah and Ezekiel present simultaneously on multiple occasions, breaking their previous pattern of alternating appearances. Teacher Martha Wilson's personal diary, discovered during the investigation, noted on February 17th, "Most unusual tension between Todd boys today. Seated at opposite ends of classroom, exchanging such hostile glances that several students commented." The Creek County Gazette Society column from March 1914 mentioned both twins attending the spring agricultural fair, with reporter Eliza Johnson observing they moved as if repelled by each other, maintaining maximum distance throughout the event. The most significant public record from this period appeared in the April 23, 1914 edition of the Gazette, reporting that neighbors of the Todd family alerted Sheriff Holcomb to disturbing sounds emanating from the property late Tuesday night, described as terrible screams, unlike anything human. The brief article concluded with Holcomb's assessment that the sounds likely came from a mountain lion known to roam the area, and that no further investigation was warranted. The journal's final entry, dated June 17, 1914, consists of increasingly frantic writing. The Reflections' corruption has reached its limit. He speaks now of abandoning our work, of destroying the collection, claiming remorse has awakened within him. Such betrayal confirms what I have long suspected. He is unworthy of our sacred purpose. Perfect symmetry cannot contain contradictory elements. Tonight, I have proposed a final ritual to determine which of us truly deserves to continue the great work. One mirror must break. He or I. The Reflection decides tonight. The journal abruptly ends mid-page, with chemical analysis indicating the final ink marks were made by a hand in motion, suggesting the writer was interrupted or disturbed while writing. No further entries appear in the remaining blank pages, creating what Dr. Mitchell termed an ominous silence more disturbing than any confession. The Creek County Death Registry contains an entry dated July 3, 1914, recording the death of Ezekiel Todd, age 19, with cause listed as accidental fall into abandoned mine shaft during geological exploration. The document bears the signature of Sheriff Willard Holcomb, who certified the death despite the notable absence of a recovered body. The Bristow Herald published a brief obituary on July 7, stating only that Ezekiel Todd, son of Everett and Martha Todd, met with tragic accident while pursuing scientific interests. Private services held at family residence. Courthouse records reveal no formal inquest or investigation, with Sheriff Holcomb's official report citing the father's statement that the shaft collapsed after the fall, making recovery impossible. The apparent acceptance of this account without verification aligns with what historian Robert Jenkins described as common rural practice when influential families experienced tragedy. Following this incident, only one twin remained visible in Bristow, consistently identifying himself as Elijah. Bristow High School records confirm his continued attendance, with his 1915 graduation certificate noting honors in sciences. The school yearbook from that year contains a senior portrait showing a solemn young man whose inscription reads simply, "Knowledge is power." University of Oklahoma admission records show Elijah Todd enrolled in pre-medical studies in September 1915, with his application emphasizing interest in anatomical research. Academic transcripts reveal exceptional performance in anatomy and chemistry, though professors noted his laboratory work occasionally violated protocol in pursuit of unorthodox experimentation. Former classmate Dr. Thomas Williams, interviewed in 1958, recalled Elijah as brilliantly focused but increasingly eccentric during their shared courses. He would sometimes pause mid-conversation, Williams reported, tilting his head as if listening to someone unseen, before continuing with slightly altered perspective. Multiple university contemporaries described witnessing Elijah engaged in apparent arguments with himself in empty classrooms or library corners. His dormitory roommate requested reassignment after one semester, citing disturbance from Todd's habit of conducting lengthy debates with himself in the middle of the night. University records show Elijah withdrew from studies in November 1917, despite academic excellence. Dr. Mitchell's investigation attempted to determine which twin actually survived through handwriting analysis, comparing the journal to university documents. Forensic expert Willard Thompson concluded that the handwriting showed subtle but significant differences from the journal entries, suggesting either deliberately altered writing or different authorship altogether. The most compelling evidence came from Professor Harold Jenkins, who taught both twins in Bristow and later encountered the surviving twin at a medical lecture in Oklahoma City. Something fundamental had changed, Jenkins stated. The mannerisms were Elijah's, but the calculating gaze behind them was unmistakably Ezekiel's. The Todd family's gradual withdrawal from community life following Ezekiel's reported death created what local historian Margaret Wilson termed a vacuum of reliable documentation regarding their final years in Bristow. Tax records from 1915 through 1919 show steady decline in the Todd livestock operation, with annual revenues dropping nearly 60% during this period. First National Bank ledgers indicate Everett Todd liquidated several investments in 1916, while property tax assessments show neglect of outbuildings and fencing. Neighbors interviewed during the investigation recalled the family's increasing isolation. Calvin Henderson, whose farm adjoined the Todd property, reported that Old Man Todd stopped acknowledging neighbors altogether around 16 or 17, would just stare straight ahead when passed on the road. Martha Todd's deterioration became community knowledge after an incident at Webster's General Store in August 1916, where witnesses described her speaking in tongues and proclaiming divine messages before Everett hurriedly removed her. Dr. Samuel Richardson's medical logs contain 3 entries regarding house calls to the Todd residence between 1917 and 1918, each noting Martha's advanced religious melancholia and physical deterioration, suggesting self-neglect. The surviving twins' presence in Bristow became increasingly sporadic after university enrollment, though holiday visits were noted in the Creek County Gazette's Society columns. Multiple accounts described noticeable changes in his appearance and manner. Druggist Howard Jenkins recalled that the Todd boy who remained started dressing like city folks, with expensive clothes and gold cufflinks that seemed beyond a student's means. Local gossip documented in postmistress Gertrude Miller's personal diary suggested the twin developed tastes for luxuries that caused considerable strain on family finances. Miller recorded overhearing Everett Todd in heated argument with his son regarding excessive expenditures in Tulsa that must cease immediately. County records show the Todd property sold on November 8, 1919, to James Harrington, a cattle rancher expanding his holdings. The sale price was notably below market value, suggesting urgency in the transaction. The Bristow Herald reported on November 15 that the Todd family has relocated to California for Mrs. Todd's health benefits, though no forwarding address appeared in any official records. Particularly significant was the discovery during excavation that the cellar had been deliberately sealed before their departure, with architectural analysis indicating the entrance had been filled with concrete and covered with 3 feet of soil, effectively concealing its existence from the property's subsequent owners. The careful preservation of the cellar's contents, undisturbed for nearly 40 years until accidentally uncovered by highway construction, suggested deliberate intent to preserve, rather than conceal evidence, what Dr. Mitchell characterized as not burial but preservation, as if the collection was too precious to destroy, despite the risks of discovery. The investigation's expansion beyond Oklahoma required extensive interagency cooperation, with Dr. Mitchell securing assistance from California authorities through official FBI channels. Los Angeles County records confirmed Elijah Todd's arrival in January 1920, with his employment application at Westlake Medical Clinic noting 2 years of medical training at University of Oklahoma, and references that proved untraceable. Supervisor reports documented his technical competence, but noted concerning intensity with patients that led to his dismissal after 6 months. Business licensing records show Elijah established symmetrical studies photography in August 1920, initially focusing on conventional portraiture before developing what advertisements called artistic anatomical studies for medical publications. The studio's financial records indicated surprising prosperity, with tax filings showing income substantially higher than typical portrait studios of the period. Former receptionist Margaret Williams, located in a San Diego retirement community in 1957, recalled the studio's distinctive features. Mr. Todd created an unusual atmosphere. With mirrors positioned to create infinite reflections and special lighting he claimed revealed subjects' true nature. Williams noted that Todd displayed his twins' death certificate prominently, often telling clients that Losing my mirror image taught me to find the hidden symmetry in others. Studio records showed a selective clientele that increasingly included private sessions with subjects Todd described in his appointment book as possessing perfect proportional harmony. Los Angeles Police Department archives contained 3 separate inquiry reports between 1927 and 1931 regarding complaints from clients about parse, inappropriate fixation on physical measurements, and unsolicited anatomical examinations, though no formal charges were filed. The studio closed abruptly in March 1931, with lease records showing rent paid through the year despite immediate vacancy. California authorities lost track of Elijah Todd until a routine fingerprint comparison in 1957 yielded surprising connections to identity records across multiple states. Texas medical licensing applications from 1932 showed fingerprints matching Todd's California records, but under the name Edward Thompson, who briefly operated a medical supply business in Dallas, specializing in preservation materials and anatomical specimens. New Mexico driver's license records from 1939 contained matching fingerprints for Robert Turner, a portrait photographer in Santa Fe whose business dissolved after local newspapers reported disturbing anatomical displays discovered in his studio basement. Most significant was the Oklahoma medical examiner's discovery that fingerprints from Roland Matthews, briefly detained in Oklahoma City in 1953, matched those of Elijah Todd despite the 40-year age difference. Internal investigative notes revealed Matthews had been questioned after a school janitor reported him measuring children's proportions on a playground, though insufficient evidence led to his release. The fingerprint connections established a disturbing pattern of movement, suggesting the survivor adopted at least 4 documented identities while pursuing activities consistently focused on human anatomy, preservation techniques, and physical measurement. With recurring proximity to educational institutions and periodic reports of boundary violations that never quite reached the threshold for formal prosecution. Oklahoma City Police Department records dated March 17, 1953 document the detention of Roland Matthews, described as elderly male, approximately 60 years old, well-dressed, articulate, following reports of suspicious behavior near Adams Elementary School. According to the initial complaint filed by school principal Dorothy Wilson, Matthews had been observed on 3 consecutive days, sketching children during recess, and approaching students with offers to measure their faces for artistic purposes. Officer James Harrington's report states, Matthews presented identification showing residence at Carson Boarding House on North Robinson Avenue and claimed to be a retired photographer conducting research for a technical manual on portraiture across age groups. The report notes Matthews' polite demeanor and scholarly explanation of artistic proportions that initially reduced concerns. Matthews was released with a warning after 6 hours of questioning, having committed no explicit violation. The case took a disturbing turn when fingerprint processing completed 3 days later identified Matthews as matching California records for Elijah Todd from 1921. Detective Samuel Richardson's supplemental report details the subsequent search of Matthews' boarding house room, conducted with tenant consent after his release, but before notification of fingerprint results. The search revealed disturbing contents organized with meticulous precision. 12 leather-bound albums containing newspaper clippings about the original disappearances from Bristow and surrounding communities between 1911 to 1913, including obscure local reports impossible to obtain without deliberate research. Adjacent shelving held more recent articles about missing children from Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico between 1940 to 1952, annotated with handwritten notes assessing symmetrical potential and proportional harmony. Most alarming was a detailed hand-drawn map of the original Todd property with the seller rendered in architectural precision, including measurements and notations about preservation status, with dates suggesting periodic inspections spanning decades. Carson boarding house manager Ethel Williams reported in her statement that Matthews had maintained residence for approximately 7 months, describing him as unfailingly polite, paid rent early, spoke little with other boarders. Williams recalled Matthews typically departed for several days each month, explaining these absences as field research trips. She noted that following police questioning, Matthews returned briefly to the boarding house, packed a single suitcase, and departed after paying his rent through the month, leaving behind numerous possessions including books, clothing, and his collected albums. Detective Richardson's final report included photographs of the room's most disturbing feature, a wall-sized mirror with anatomical drawings in grease pencil, creating overlapping human outlines that, when viewed from specific angles, formed what Richardson described as a disturbing composite figure with precisely aligned features from different subjects. Oklahoma City Police distributed Matthews' description to surrounding jurisdictions, but despite an extensive multi-state alert, no confirmed sightings were ever reported. The department's final case note, dated June 1953, states simply, "Subject appears to have extensive experience evading identification and establishing new personas. Consider extremely cautious if encountered." The forensic laboratory at Oklahoma State University received the complete collection of remains in October 1957, allowing Dr. Mitchell's team to apply analytical techniques unavailable during the initial excavation. Carbon dating confirmed all remains originated within the same approximate time frame, 1911 to 1914, aligning with the known disappearances. The most significant discovery came through meticulous bone development analysis conducted by forensic anthropologist Dr. Thomas Jenkins, who concluded the collection contained 11 distinct individuals rather than the 6 documented missing children. Age estimation techniques revealed 8 juvenile subjects aged between 8 and 12, consistent with known victims, plus 3 previously undocumented individuals. A female, approximately 16 years old, a male child around 6 years of age, and most significantly, an adult male in his late teens. The discovery of undocumented victims prompted Dr. Mitchell to hypothesize that the Todd's activities extended beyond the investigation's geographic focus, likely encompassing communities outside the original search parameters. Dental comparison proved particularly revelatory when University of Oklahoma records produced Elijah Todd's entrance examination dental charts from 1915. Dr. Harold Williams, forensic odontologist, determined conclusively that the adult remains could not belong to the twin who had enrolled at the university, stating in his report that the dental structure of the remains demonstrates 3 distinctive features absent in Elijah Todd's dental records, including a rotated lateral incisor and distinctive molar formation. This evidence established that the surviving twin who attended university as Elijah must actually have been Ezekiel. Having assumed his brother's identity following the June 1914 confrontation documented in the final journal entry. Most disturbing was the revelation uncovered when Dr. Mitchell's team mapped the precise arrangement of remains as discovered in the cellar. Computer modeling revealed what the report described as an elaborate, symmetrical design, impossibly precise to have occurred through random placement or settling over time. The adult remains occupied the central position in the arrangement, with juvenile remains creating concentric patterns around this focal point. Forensic architect Robert Thompson concluded that achieving such precise positioning would have required extensive knowledge of preservation techniques and considerable time to arrange with mathematical precision. The pattern's geometric properties aligned exactly with the perfect symmetry repeatedly referenced in the journal, suggesting that Ezekiel had incorporated his brother into what he perceived as the ultimate expression of their disturbed philosophy. Dr. Mitchell's report concluded that the evidence suggests Ezekiel murdered Elijah during their June 1914 confrontation, then proceeded to incorporate his remains as the centerpiece of the Macabre collection, creating a final pattern that, in his disturbed perception, represented the ultimate achievement of their shared obsession with symmetrical perfection. The investigation's concluding phase focused on compiling evidence of continued activity across decades and jurisdictions, revealing what Dr. Mitchell termed a lifetime dedicated to the perpetuation of pathological symmetry. Her team established a timeline of suspicious incidents connected to the surviving twins' multiple identities, 12 missing persons cases in Los Angeles, between 1,924 to 1,929, involving subjects described in police reports as possessing unusual physical symmetry. 5 disappearances in Dallas, coinciding with Edward Thompson's medical supply business. 7 missing children in Santa Fe during Robert Turner's photography business. And 14 cases in Oklahoma City between 1,950 to 1,953 while Roland Matthews resided there. The Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation compiled this evidence into a comprehensive report published April 17, 1958, which the Daily Oklahoman dubbed the definitive account of the Symmetry murders. Despite coordinated multi-state efforts, including the first use of the FBI's National Alert System for a historical case, Ezekiel Todd was never located. The investigation formally concluded with a press conference on May 12, 1958, though Dr. Mitchell insisted on including a disturbing postscript in the official report. Beginning in November 1957, workers connected to the cellar's discovery experienced a pattern of deaths that defied coincidental explanation. Frank Denton, the bulldozer operator who initially uncovered the site, drowned in Keystone Lake on November 21st, despite being a capable swimmer. Precisely 1 month later, December 21st, site foreman Robert Williams died when his house inexplicably caught fire while he slept. On January 21st, 1958 excavation assistant Thomas Jenkins was found in his sealed garage, his car engine running, in what investigators ruled a suicide, despite family insistence he had been in good spirits. Dr. Mitchell documented that each man had reported receiving hand-drawn postcards depicting symmetrical patterns prior to their deaths. Most disturbing was Mitchell's observation that the deaths formed a pattern themselves: drowning, water, fire, and asphyxiation, air, suggesting a fourth death might involve earth or burial. She calculated that if the pattern continued, a fourth death would occur precisely on the winter solstice, December 21st, 1958. The report concluded with her haunting observation: some patterns, once established, resist all efforts to break them. In the case of the Todd twins, I fear we have not found the end of the story, merely revealed its ongoing nature, to a world unprepared for such methodical malevolence. A handwritten addendum to the archive copy, dated January 1959, notes that Dr. Mitchell herself disappeared on December 21st, 1958, after receiving a package containing a mirror etched with symmetrical patterns. Her body was discovered 3 days later in a meticulously excavated pit on the former Todd property, the dimensions of the grave precisely matching her height and width. The case officially remains open in Oklahoma State Police records, classified as an active investigation despite the passage of decades, a designation that ensures the file is never closed on what may be the longest active serial murder case in American history.